My sister made a speech at my wedding to announce her pregnancy and ruin my party, but she didn't know her husband also has something to say about it. And now she's getting divorced, losing her usual lifestyle and blaming me. I never wanted a sister. I was perfectly happy being an only child until my mom divorced my dad when I was 2 and married Tom, my stepfather. Then came Janice, my half-sister, 5 years younger than me. From the moment she could walk and talk, she became the center of our family's universe. Everything revolved around her, and honestly, it still does. My name is Lucy, and I'm 30 now. Looking back at our childhood, I can still see how differently we were treated. While I had to work for everything I wanted, Janice just had to bat her eyelashes at Mom and Tom, and they'd give her anything. New clothes? Done. Latest phone? No problem. Extra allowance? You got it, princess. Even when we both asked for the same thing, somehow Janice's version would always be more expensive, newer, or better than mine. Lucy, don't be so hard on your sister, Mom would say whenever I complained. She's younger than you, you need to set a good example. Then she'd usually add something like, besides, you're more mature. You understand these things better. As if being mature was supposed to make up for the obvious favoritism. But setting an example became impossible when Janice turned every situation into a competition. If I got an A on a test, she'd come home with an A+ and a special commendation from the teacher. If I joined the debate club, she'd become the president of 3 different clubs. If I wore a new outfit to a family gathering, she'd show up in something designer that made my clothes look like they came from a discount store. It was exhausting, and eventually, I just stopped trying to compete. As we grew older, I chose to distance myself from her. I moved out as soon as I could afford it and built my own life. That's how I met David, my fiancé. We've been together for 3 years now, and he's everything I could have wished for. Kind, understanding, and completely supportive of my decision to keep minimal contact with my family. He saw right through Janice's act the first time he met her at a family dinner, where she spent the entire evening talking about her recent promotion and her amazing apartment. You don't need their drama. He'd tell me whenever I felt guilty about missing another family dinner. Focus on what makes you happy. And I was happy, really happy until last week. Our wedding was just 7 days away, and everything was perfect. The venue was booked, the flowers were ordered, and the guest list was finalized. I didn't want to invite Janice, but Mom insisted, calling me almost every day until I gave in. She's your sister, Lucy, Mom had argued over the phone. How would it look if your only sister wasn't at your wedding? People would talk. Do you want that kind of drama on your special day? I gave in, just to keep the peace. I thought I could handle one day of Janice's usual attention-seeking behavior. It was Tuesday evening when my phone rang. I smiled when I saw it was my cousin Sarah calling. She worked at the wedding agency handling our ceremony and had been absolutely amazing throughout the planning process. I figured she wanted to discuss some last-minute details about the seating arrangement or the dinner service. Hey, Sarah. What's up? I answered cheerfully, curled up on my couch with a glass of wine. David was working late that night, so I was having a quiet evening to myself. There was a slight pause before she spoke, and something about that silence made my heart skip a beat. Lucy, I need to tell you something about Janice. My stomach immediately dropped. Nothing good ever came from conversations about my sister. I set my wine glass down, already preparing myself for whatever drama was coming. What about her? She called me late last night, Sarah said, her voice careful. She wants to make an announcement at your wedding before anyone else speaks. She was very insistent about the timing. I sat up straighter, my wine forgotten. What kind of announcement? She's pregnant, Lucy. She wants to announce it before the congratulations begin. She said she wants all the attention on her news. She practically gloated about how everyone would forget about you and spend the evening congratulating her instead. She even suggested rearranging the reception schedule to give people more time to celebrate her news. I felt the familiar anger rising in my chest, the same anger I'd felt countless times throughout our childhood when Janice would steal the spotlight. But this time was different. This wasn't a school play or a family dinner. This was my wedding day, the one day that was supposed to be about me and David. That little. I stopped myself, taking a deep breath. Sarah, thank you for telling me. I can't believe she'd try to pull something like this. Actually, no. I can totally believe it. This is exactly like her. I couldn't keep it from you, Sarah replied. I know how long you've been planning this wedding, how much it means to you. I just thought you should know what she's planning. You deserve to be prepared. After hanging up, I immediately called David. He listened patiently as I ranted about Janice's latest scheme to upstage me, making sympathetic noises at all the right moments. Babe, before you do anything, I have an idea, he said when I finally paused for breath. Why don't you talk to Mark first? Janice's husband might be able to talk some sense into her. He's always seemed like a reasonable guy. I stopped pacing around our living room. You know what? That's actually brilliant. Mark's always been the reasonable one in their relationship. He's the only one who can sometimes get Janice to back down when she gets like this. I met Mark the next day at a quiet coffee shop downtown. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He'd always been thoughtful like that, probably one of the reasons I'd wondered how someone as level-headed as him ended up with my drama-loving sister. He had his laptop open, clearly trying to get some work done while waiting. "Thanks for meeting me on such short notice," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. I wouldn't have asked if it wasn't important. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes, making me wonder if he was having troubles of his own. Mark smiled, closing his laptop and pushing one of the coffees toward me. "No problem, Lucy. You sounded pretty serious on the phone. What's going on? Everything okay with the wedding preparations?" I took a deep breath, wrapping my hands around the warm cup and trying to figure out how to start this conversation. The usual coffee shop chatter around us felt oddly comforting. "It's about Janice. She's planning something for my wedding, and I need your help to stop it." "What's she planning now?" He sighed, looking more tired than curious. He stirred his coffee absently, and I could tell he was used to dealing with my sister's schemes. "Last week she was talking about some grand entrance she wanted to make at the reception." "It's worse than that." I leaned forward. "She wants to announce her pregnancy right before the wedding toasts. She's already arranged it with Sarah at the wedding agency." I watched his face carefully as I spoke, but nothing could have prepared me for his reaction. Mark's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth, his face went completely pale, and for a moment, I thought he might pass out. A drop of coffee spilled onto his white shirt, but he didn't seem to notice. "She what?" "She's pregnant, Mark. At least that's what she's telling people, and she wants to announce it at my wedding to steal all the attention." I paused, noticing how he seemed to be struggling to breathe. His hands were trembling so badly he had to set the cup down. "Mark, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He set his cup down so hard that coffee sloshed over the rim, spreading across the table like a brown tide. "Lucy, there's something you need to know." His voice was barely above a whisper, and he leaned in so close I could smell his minty breath. "I had a vasectomy 5 years ago, before Janice and I got married. Now it was my turn to freeze." The noise of the coffee shop seemed to fade away, leaving nothing but the sound of my own heartbeat. "You what?" "I can't have children. It's physically impossible." He ran a hand through his hair, looking shell-shocked. "Janice and I agreed we didn't want kids. We talked about it before getting married. She's always said she hated the idea of being a mother. We were going to travel, focus on our careers. Hell, just last month she was talking about how glad she was we didn't have to deal with the hassle of children." I sat back in my chair, my mind racing through every conversation I'd ever had with Janice about children. She'd always changed the subject or made some sarcastic comment about how much she enjoyed her freedom. "Does she know about the vasectomy?" "No." He shook his head, his voice cracking. "I never told her. We were so in sync about not wanting children, it never seemed necessary to mention it." His hands were shaking now as he pulled out his phone and started scrolling through it frantically. "I still have the medical records. If she's pregnant then it's not yours," I finished quietly, watching as the realization of what this meant fully hit him. Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a screech that made nearby customers turn and stare. "I need to go talk to her right now. I'm going to end this marriage today." I can't believe she would. "Wait." I grabbed his arm, pulling him back down. "I have a better idea." Mark sank back into his chair, his face a mix of anger and devastation. He looked like a man whose entire world had just crumbled around him. "A better idea than confronting my wife about her affair?" "I'm listening, but it better be good, Lucy. Because right now, all I can think about is going home and packing her bags." I leaned forward, lowering my voice even though no one was near enough to hear. My heart was racing with the plan forming in my mind. Let her make her announcement at the wedding. Let her have her moment in the spotlight. Let her think she's won, that she's successfully stolen all the attention. I paused for effect, "And then you can share your own news. You want me to expose her in front of everyone?" Mark's eyes widened as he caught on to what I was suggesting. "That's actually brilliant, and terrible, but mostly brilliant." He pulled out his phone again. "I can get the medical records from my doctor tomorrow. Official documentation, dated 5 years ago." I called Sarah as soon as I left the coffee shop, practically bouncing with excitement. "Change of plans," I told her, ducking into my car to avoid the light rain that had started falling. "Let Janice speak first at the reception. Tell her you managed to rearrange everything just for her special announcement." "Are you sure?" Sarah sounded skeptical. "I thought you wanted to stop her. You seemed pretty upset about it yesterday." "Oh, I'm not stopping her," I replied, unable to keep the glee out of my voice. "I'm giving her exactly what she wants. Trust me, this is going to be better than any wedding drama you've ever seen." The next few days passed in a blur of final wedding preparations. Mom called several times, gushing about how beautiful Janice's new dress was and how excited she was about the wedding. She even had the nerve to suggest that Janice should be in more of the professional photos since she's glowing so beautifully right now. I bit my tongue every time, knowing that soon they'd all understand exactly who my sister really was. "Are you sure about this?" David asked me the night before our wedding as we sat on our couch, going over last-minute details. "It's going to cause a lot of family drama. Mom might never forgive you." I snuggled closer to him, grateful for his concern but certain about my decision. "Janice brought this on herself. She's trying to ruin our wedding day because she can't stand not being the center of attention for once. She's been doing this our entire lives, and everyone just lets her get away with it. And this time," I smiled grimly, "this time she's going to learn that actions have consequences." "Well," David said, pulling me closer, "at least no one will ever forget our wedding." As I fell asleep that night, I imagined the look on Janice's face when her perfect plan fell apart. The way her triumphant smile would freeze when Mark stood up with those medical records. For once, my little sister's need to be the center of attention was going to backfire spectacularly. And I couldn't wait to watch it happen. My wedding day started perfectly. The sun was shining through the gauzy curtains of my bridal suite. My hair and makeup turned out exactly as I'd hoped, and my dress fit like a dream. I felt strangely calm, probably because I knew exactly what was coming. Sarah arrived early at the venue to coordinate everything. She brought me a latte and some pastries, though my stomach was too full of anticipation to eat much. "Janice has already called me 3 times this morning," she whispered as she helped adjust my veil. She wanted to make sure she'd be speaking first. I told her everything was arranged exactly as she wanted. She was practically gloating. Said something about making this a day everyone would remember. She even asked if we could position her at the most photogenic angle during her announcement. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The church was filled with the scent of lilies and roses, and soft violin music played as my bridesmaids walked down the aisle. David teared up when he saw me walking toward him, and for those precious moments, I almost forgot about the drama to come. But then I spotted Janice in the front row, sitting next to our mother. They were both dabbing at their eyes with tissues, but while Mom was watching me, Janice kept glancing around the room, probably counting how many people would witness her big moment later. "She's wearing white," one of my bridesmaids muttered during the photo session, adjusting my train for another shot. "Who wears white to their sister's wedding? And that dress, it's practically a wedding gown itself." I just smiled, holding my bouquet a little higher. Let her have her moment. Trust me, the color of her dress will be the least shocking thing about today. The real show began at the reception. The ballroom was gorgeous, with twinkling lights and flowers everywhere, but I could barely focus on the decorations I'd spent months choosing. Mom and Tom couldn't stop fawning over Janice, calling her the most beautiful girl at the party, at my wedding. I caught them huddled together several times, whispering and looking excited. Mom kept touching Janice's stomach when she thought no one was looking. Mark was sitting quietly at his table, nursing a glass of whiskey. He'd barely touched his food, and I noticed his hand kept going to his jacket pocket where I knew he had the medical records. His face was pale, and he flinched every time someone congratulated him about the big day. I caught his eye and gave him a slight nod. He nodded back, his face grim but determined. Sarah took the microphone, right on schedule. The crystal chandeliers dimmed slightly, creating the perfect spotlight effect Janice had requested. "Before we begin the traditional toasts," she announced, her voice professionally cheerful, "Janice, the bride's sister, has a special announcement she'd like to make." Janice practically ran to the front of the room, her white dress sparkling under the lights. She was glowing with excitement, clutching the microphone like it was her lifeline to attention. "Everyone, I have amazing news." Her voice was trembling with fake emotion, and she paused to make sure all eyes were on her. Mark and I, she paused again for dramatic effect, her free hand resting on her stomach. "We're having a baby." The room erupted in gasps and cheers. Mom burst into tears, clutching Tom's arm, and Tom was beaming with pride, already looking like a proud grandfather. Guests started getting up from their seats to congratulate Janice, exactly as she'd planned. Women rushed forward to hug her. Men called out congratulations to Mark, who remained frozen in his seat. Janice was soaking it all in, one hand resting dramatically on her still flat stomach, the other wiping away perfectly timed tears of joy. I watched as she shot me a triumphant look across the room, her eyes glittering with satisfaction. Poor Janice, she thought she'd won. She thought she'd successfully stolen my spotlight, just like she'd done so many times before. She had no idea what was coming. Mark stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. The sound cut through the excited chatter like a knife. The whispers gradually died down as he walked to the front of the room, medical papers in hand, his face set in stone. Janice's smile faltered slightly when she saw him approaching. "I have an announcement too," he said, his voice carrying across the now quieting room. His hands were steady as he unfolded the papers. I had a vasectomy 5 years ago, before Janice and I got married. I have the medical records right here. He held up the papers, and I could see the official hospital letterhead from where I sat. I can't have children. It's physically impossible. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. Every head in the room turned to stare at Janice, whose face had gone from triumphant to ghost white in seconds. Her perfectly manicured hands began to tremble. That's not possible," she stammered, her voice high and panicky. She looked around the room, seemingly searching for support. There must be some mistake. The doctors must have. "No mistake," Mark said, his voice hard as steel. He took a step closer to her. "I have follow-up tests confirming it's permanent, which means either this is a medical miracle," he paused, looking directly at her, "or you've been sleeping with someone else." Mom let out a wail and collapsed into her chair. Tom was frozen in place, his face turning an alarming shade of red as he looked between his daughter and son-in-law. "And Janice?" She started crying, mascara running down her face, her carefully crafted image crumbling by the second. "Mark, please," she sobbed, reaching for his arm. He stepped back from her touch. "Not here. We can talk about this at home. I can explain." But it was too late. The damage was done. Janice's perfect moment had turned into her worst nightmare, and everyone was watching. She ran from the room, her white dress flashing through the crowd, with Mom and Tom hurrying after her. Mark just stood there, still holding the medical records, as whispers erupted around the room. I could already hear people pulling out their phones, no doubt eager to share this drama on social media. I felt David's hand slip into mine under the table. "You okay?" he whispered, giving my fingers a gentle squeeze. I squeezed his hand back and smiled, watching as Sarah tried to restore order to the reception. Never better. I turned to face my new husband. "Should we cut the cake? I think everyone could use a distraction right about now." The morning after my wedding, my phone rang. I was still in bed, surrounded by scattered wrapping paper from opening gifts the night before, when I saw my mother's name on the screen. "I know exactly what you did," she said without even saying hello. "You deliberately framed and shamed your sister. You could have prevented this whole situation, and Janice could have quietly divorced her husband. But you chose to humiliate her instead. Are you kidding me?" I sat up straight in bed. "Janice is the one to blame here. She tried to ruin my wedding day. She's the one who got pregnant from her lover, not her husband. She brought this on herself. You've always been jealous of your sister." Mom's voice was cold. "That's why you took revenge on her like this." I didn't bother responding. I just hung up the phone, my hands shaking with anger. Within minutes, messages from Janice started flooding my phone. Threat after threat, curse after curse, each one more vicious than the last. She called me vile, evil, accused me of ruining her marriage. The messages kept coming for days. "Just turn it off," David suggested, watching me stress over each new notification. "We're leaving for our honeymoon anyway." He was right. I switched off my phone, and for 2 blissful weeks, David and I enjoyed complete peace on our tropical island. White sand beaches, crystal clear water, and not a single family drama in sight. It was perfect, but reality crashed back hard when we returned home. Sarah called almost immediately. "Lucy, you need to see this," she said. One of the wedding guests posted a video of what happened. It's gone viral, millions of views already. The whole town is talking about it. And Janice, she's divorcing Mark. A few days later, Mom and Janice showed up at my front door unannounced. They barged in before I could stop them. "This is all your fault," Mom declared. "You need to pay for Janice's divorce proceedings." "You're crazy," I told them, backing away. "I'm not paying anything." "I'll sue you for shaming me," Janice screamed, her face red with anger. I pointed at the door. "Go ask your lover for money, not me. Get out of my house." They left that day, but the harassment didn't stop. My phone kept buzzing with calls and messages full of threats and insults from both of them. Finally, David had enough. He called my mother himself. "If you and Janice don't stop harassing Lucy right now, I'm filing a police report against both of you." The call stopped after that, but the drama wasn't over. Through our relatives, we heard about the divorce proceedings. Janice was trying everything to save face. She kept insisting the baby was Mark's, and her lawyer even presented statistics from the internet about men getting women pregnant after vasectomies. They tried to argue that Mark's procedure must have been done incorrectly. The DNA test destroyed that defense completely. It proved without a doubt that Mark wasn't the father. Janice lost everything in the divorce. Just when I thought it was all over, Mom called again, months later. Her tone was different this time, almost conciliatory. "I know we've had our differences," she said, "but Janice needs help. She's struggling. Just $1,000 a month would make such a difference." I couldn't help but laugh. "Are you serious? After everything she did?" "Lucy, please, She's your sister. Who's the father, Mom? I asked suddenly. The long silence told me everything. She's not sure, Mom finally admitted. There were several possibilities. I felt a wave of disgust. Let me get this straight. Janice cheated on her husband with multiple men, tried to pass off the baby as his, attempted to ruin my wedding, and now you want me to support her? Tell Janice to grow up and solve her own problems. Don't call me again. That was the last time I spoke to either of them. I heard through relatives that Janice moved back in with our parents after the baby was born. The story of my wedding has become something of a legend in our family and social circle. People still bring it up at parties and gatherings, though they usually wait until I'm out of earshot. These days, I'm focusing on my own happiness. David and I are building our life together, free from the drama that defined my relationship with my sister for so many years. Sometimes I think about Janice and the baby, but then I remember that you can't help people who won't help themselves. The last time someone asked me if I regretted how everything played out at the wedding, I just smiled and shook my head. Some people need to learn that actions have consequences, I said. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let them learn that lesson on their own.